In 79 AD, deep beneath Rome's loudest arena, a 19-year-old Dean girl named Sabina stood shackled in complete darkness. The stone beneath her feet was cold, damp, and uneven. Iron restraints bit into her wrists and ankles. The air smelled of mold, blood, and old fear. Above her, 50,000 Romans roared in celebration. Their cheers rolled through the stone like distant thunder, vibrating down through tunnels and corridors carved into the earth itself. They were cheering the Gladiator, who had just murdered her brothers. What happened to Sabina over the next 3 hours became one of Rome's most aggressively concealed practices, a ritual so brutal that even Rome's own historians argued over whether it should ever be recorded. A reward system that turned victorious fighters into temporary masters of life and death once the gates closed and the crowd dispersed. This was not rumor. This was not legend. This was the machinery of empire functioning exactly as designed. The events that followed were later attributed to accounts preserved by Cassius Dio, supported indirectly by archaeological findings beneath the Colosseum, and echoed faintly in sanitized Senate records. Rome did not deny these practices outright. It simply buried them beneath euphemism, silence, and selective memory. The Colosseum itself stood as Rome's monument to domination. Completed shortly after these events in 80 AD, it was capable of holding entire armies of spectators. Its vast stone skeleton enclosed not only the arena floor but a sprawling underground complex known as the Hypogeum. Beneath the sand lay cages, lifts, corridors, and holding chambers designed to move animals, weapons, scenery, fighters, and prisoners with mechanical precision. The sand itself served a purpose. It absorbed blood. Gladiator games were not mere entertainment. They were political messaging, religious ritual, and social intimidation fused into a single spectacle. Every match reinforced the idea that Rome controlled not only territory, but fate itself. Victory and humiliation were choreographed lessons delivered to the masses. In 78 AD, Roman forces crushed a Dean uprising in the highlands beyond the empire's northern reaches. The campaign was swift and merciless. Villages were burned. Leaders were executed. Survivors were taken in chains. When the general returned to Rome, he brought not only treasure and livestock but hundreds of captives. Among them were noble women, priestesses, warriors, and daughters of clan leaders. Rome did not simply conquer enemies, it erased them. Sabina had been engaged to a warrior named Disabilis. He was killed during the campaign. She watched as her home was set ablaze. She watched her people scattered, bound, and marched south. By the time she arrived beneath the arena, her world no longer existed. Above her, Gaius Valerius Maximus stood victorious, 32 years old, nearly 6 feet tall. His body bore the map of 14 years of violence. Born a slave after his father died in debt prison, he had survived by killing for an audience. He had defeated dozens in sanctioned combat. His dream was freedom. His fear was anonymity, dying nameless and discarded with iron hooks. That afternoon, he defeated the Dean champion in front of Emperor Titus. The crowd erupted. The ritual proceeded. His reward followed standard protocol: coin, laurel wreath, privilege, and first selection among the captured women. Sabina stood among 17 others in a holding chamber. She did not cry. She did not beg. She wanted dignity or death. What she feared most was not pain, but becoming spectacle for the same crowd that celebrated her people's destruction. That morning, a guard told her she had been selected for the afternoon event. She did not yet understand what that meant. She was about to learn that Rome's version of mercy could be more horrifying than its cruelty. This was not about individual lives. It was psychological warfare. Rome understood that physical conquest alone was insufficient. True domination required breaking identity, corrupting tradition, and proving that even the most protected members of a society now belonged to Rome. The master of games descended into the Hypogeum precisely as the afternoon shadows stretched across the arena. He carried a bronze tablet listing rewards. Gaius Valerius Maximus still trembled with adrenaline. Blood dried across his armor. By imperial tradition, the victor was entitled to spoils. The tablet offered choices: gold, wine, a proper bed, or Victoria Carnals, the carnal privilege granted to champions. For a man who owned nothing and could be killed at any moment, this was one of the only times he held power. Roman society did not merely permit this system, It celebrated it. The conquered existed to validate the conqueror. That was the empire's logic. Preparation began immediately. Guards entered the women's holding area carrying buckets of water. The captives were scrubbed clean, their hair combed, their torn clothing replaced with plain tunics. Attendants inspected them, marking notes on wax tablets. An older priestess whispered the truth none wanted to hear. They were being prepared either for the show or for what followed. Above them, the crowd gathered for the afternoon interlude. Between major matches, Roman arenas staged mock hunts, scripted battles, and mythological reenactments. Condemned prisoners were forced to play the roles of figures who died violently in legend. That day, the spectacle was humiliation. 20 Dean women were raised through the arena lifts. Sabina stepped into blinding sunlight and a wall of sound. The roar struck her like a physical blow. She smelled roasting food, heavy perfume, and beneath it all, iron and decay baked into the sand. A herald announced their crimes: rebellion, impiety, resistance. Then came the twist. They were ordered to fight each other in pairs with wooden swords. The winners would be claimed. The losers would die. Sabina faced Camasiccus, a woman she had known all her life. Neither raised a weapon. For 90 seconds they stood still as the crowd screamed. Confusion turned to rage. Debris rained down. Guards stormed in. Camasiccus was struck down. Sabina rushed to her. Both were dragged away. Below the arena, scribes recorded the outcome. Resistant captives were transferred to private chambers for exclusive allocation. These chambers were small, orderly, and deliberate. Stone benches, iron rings embedded in walls, doors locking only from the outside. This was not improvised cruelty. It was architecture. At 4 p.m, Gaius Valerius Maximus entered Sabina's chamber. He held absolute legal authority. She had none. History records no dialogue, only a clerk's notation, but something unexpected occurred. He removed his helmet, set aside his weapon, sat in silence. Minutes passed. He spoke to her in broken Dean. They exchanged names of the dead. They spoke of fathers executed, of villages burned, of lives erased. 2 hours passed, guards checked, heard voices, walked on. At 6 o'clock, Maximus invoked the only loophole permitted by arena bureaucracy. He declared Sabina diseased and refused the allocation. Procedure took over. She was transferred to medical holding. She died 3 days later from infection. Gaius Valerius Maximus refused rewards again after subsequent victories. Whispers spread. His behavior inspired others. Trainers responded with punishment. In September of 79 AD, a complaint reached the Senate. The issue forced public acknowledgement of practices long ignored. Sanitized records mentioned debates over customs regarding defeated female captives. The argument was not moral, it was strategic. Provincial governors warned that these practices were fueling rebellion. In October, the Senate passed what later historians labeled the Lex Captiva. Female captives could no longer be distributed as public rewards in arena spectacles. Private exploitation continued. The audience was removed, not the crime. 3 months later, Maximus earned his freedom through combat. His final recorded act was purchasing the freedom of a Dean woman named Camasiccus. Sabina's death was never debated. Rome industrialized cruelty. Violence was standardized, ritualized, and documented. Excavations beneath the Colosseum revealed chambers with restraints, drainage channels, and scratch marks carved into stone. Bronze tags labeled captiva confirm human beings were inventory. Rome conquered identity, memory, and meaning. Its brilliance and moral emptiness coexisted without contradiction. Sabina survived only because one man made an unusual choice. It changed nothing, except proving humanity could still flicker inside Rome's darkest machinery. History's darkest truths lie beneath its greatest monuments. The blood on the sand was not always from battle. Sometimes it came from innocence turned into spectacle while power received applause.